We start this afternoon with President Donald Trump intensifying his push for direct peace talks between Russia and Ukraine. So far, though, Moscow is refusing to commit to a meeting after President Trump seemed to suggest that he, quote, sort of set one up. We're standing by to hear from the White House during a press briefing for any updates. Earlier today, though, the president did clarify a key decision on U.S. troops and their involvement in a potential peacekeeping force. Listen.
What kind of assurances do you feel like you have that going forward and, past this Trump administration, it won't be American boots on the ground defending that border?
Well, you have my assurance, I'm president. There'll be some form of security. It can't be NATO because that's just not something that would ever happen. They couldn't do that. So who would want that? I mean, if you were Russia, who would want to have your enemy, your opponent, sitting on your line? You don't do that.
CNN's Elena Trina is live for us at the White House. Elena, just a point of fact, Russian approval is not a criteria for entry into NATO. I wonder what you're hearing from your sources there at the White House.
Yeah, I mean, look, and that NATO membership has long been something President Trump has said. Not only he believes it has started the war in the first place, the idea that perhaps Ukraine could become a member of NATO, but he also thinks trying to even put that on the table would only push Russia further away. And so, as you mentioned, it's not something that is a requirement to have Russia sign off on it, of course, but I don't think it ever really was something that this administration, at least, had been considering. But look, there's a lot of interesting things the president pointed out there, because this idea of U.S. troops on the ground as a security guarantee, to help the United States, European allies to defend Ukraine if a peace deal is struck, that is something the president actually left the door open to. And then, of course, you heard him there saying, no, that's actually not on the table anymore. I spoke with a White House official about that, and they essentially told me that part of this, of course, is that there are a lot of people in the president's base, a lot of people who support him, who would very much argue that he ran on the opposite of that, no more American intervention in some of these foreign wars. But then also, there are security guarantees, they argue, that the president can put on the table that will still help Europe. And you did hear the president this morning argue that he still believes that European nations need to be the front line for defense when it comes to Ukraine, because they are, in a proximity much closer to Ukraine. But some other things I want to point out, because he was also asked, Boris, about land swapping and whether that came up during the course of his conversations yesterday, and specifically questions about the Donbas region. I want you to listen to how the president answered.
Russia is a powerful military nation, whether people like it or not. It's a powerful nation. It's a much bigger nation. It's not a war that should have been started. You don't do that. You don't take on a nation that's 10 times your size. I assume you've all seen the map. A big chunk of territory is taken, and that territory has been taken. Now, they're talking about Donbass, but Donbass right now, as you know, is 79% owned and controlled by Russia. So they understand what that means.
So a few things there, Boris, that could be, a bit concerning to some European leaders, to Zelensky as well. He's essentially seeming to argue there that, one, you don't take on a nation 10 times your size. I'd remind you, of course, it was Russia that illegally invaded Ukraine. But then also the idea that Russia is controlling a good chunk of the Donbas region right now, kind of suggesting almost that Zelensky may have to concede some of that in order to get a deal done. And that's, really been the president's position through a lot of this, that both sides are going to have a give and take, but Zelensky is also going to have to definitely give if they're going to try to reach any sort of agreement that can end this war.
Elena Trina, live for us at the White House. Thank you so much. So what is Ukraine's reaction to all of this news? CNN's Ben Wiedemann is live for us in Kyiv. Ben, the push for peace talks happening as new Russian attacks are also being launched.
Yeah, the Ukrainians, Boris, were not surprised that Russia's response to the events in Washington yesterday was a heavy barrage. 270 drones and 10 ballistic missiles fired into Ukraine. 8 people killed at least, and we're talking about civilians, not soldiers on the front lines. That's the biggest one night of drones being fired since the 31st of July. And, I think perhaps President Trump takes a rosier view of the Russians, but the Ukrainians, although they are encouraged by President Trump's position in support of Ukraine, by his reception to President Zelensky yesterday, they're encouraged by the support of the European leaders who are in the White House, but they are under no illusions about Russian intentions. They don't trust Vladimir Putin, not surprisingly. They're somewhat annoyed when they hear that the American president is saying that somehow they shouldn't take on a nation 10 times bigger than Ukraine, because it wasn't Ukraine that invaded Russia, it was Russia that invaded Ukraine. And of course, they would argue that you should take on a bully rather than just lie down and let it stomp all over you. They're also rather offended by the idea that Russia controls and owns 79% of the Donbass. It is stolen territory, occupied territory, as far as Ukrainians are concerned. Now, the Ukrainians at this point are very eager to get some solid information about what kind of security guarantees are going to be provided. Essentially, they understand that politically President Trump is not prepared to station U.S. troops here. They're really looking towards the Europeans to provide the leadership in what is called a reassurance force, a force that will be present in Ukraine, the details of which have been worked out, but it will be a European-led force that will help Ukraine strengthen its military, strengthen its ability to produce weapons, and provide backup in terms of intelligence and logistics to the Ukrainian army. And they see the American role as backing up the Europeans, not with a physical presence in country, but logistics and other intelligence that might strengthen the role of the Europeans here in Ukraine. Boris?
Ben Wiedemann, Live Force in Kyiv, thank you so much.